All right, what's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Patriots Drive podcast. This is Jason Cole here to recap a slow day one of free agency for Patriots fans. On the signing side, they did notably lose cornerback J.C. Jackson, who I think, honestly, he got a bag, 5 years, $82.5 million guaranteed from the Los Angeles Chargers, $25 million signing bonus, and 40 of that is guaranteed money. So he gets a bag. I think it's a pretty doable contract. I would have liked to have seen New England sign him for somewhere around there. I think $16.5 million a year is more than fair for JC Jackson. But I want to know your thoughts, Cole, and day one of free agency.
Yeah, it's tough to lose a guy like that. And I understood the fact that, if the Patriots can't pay him $20 million a year like he's asking for, that's fine. But what's frustrating about this is seeing JC go for $16.5 million to a new team. That seems pretty reasonable we were talking about it earlier on a couple podcasts ago. That range right there, $16-17 million for JC Jackson per year is the sweet spot. That's what I think he's probably worth. And seeing him go to a different team, go to LA for that same amount of money that we thought he was worth, that's what's frustrating, is seeing the Patriots not pull the trigger in that aspect. If they didn't want to pay him 20 mil, I understand that. That makes perfect sense. He's not worth that much money. But seeing him go to a different place for that contract that we feel is pretty reasonable, that was what was frustrating. And the other part is, if they were never going to pay him the amount of money he wanted and they weren't ever close, or they didn't want to give him $16-17 million, they should have franchise tagged him. Tag him, trade him, get something back like we talked about. You have an asset, get something back for that asset. Instead, next year, we maybe will get a third-round comp pick, but that's not even guaranteed. If we sign somebody this year who's a decent player, we might not get that comp pick. So it's a frustrating situation. I think the Patriots played it pretty poorly. It's not all doom and gloom. There's still some options out there. There's still some corners. If JC only got $16.5 million, some of the other corners on the market are going to get less than they probably expected as well. And maybe the Patriots can grab somebody for cheaper than we originally thought. So that's one upside of this, but it hurts to lose a Pro Bowl, all pro caliber player like JC Jackson for sure, especially for the money that he got.
Yeah, and I've said this before. I never thought he was going to get Jalen Ramsey type money like he said he was, and people might have believed it, and maybe the Chargers would have paid for that. But when it comes down to it, he gets this contract that I think is more than fair. He is making $28 million year one, fully guaranteed, which would have been harder for New England to pull off than the Chargers with the cap space they have. But when you look at the last 4 years of his deal, he's making $12 million in 2023, 14 and a half in 2024, 14 in 2025, and 14 again in 2026. So you're telling me that you arguably have a top 5 corner on your roster for under 15 million for the last 4 years. And that could be, like I've been saying, some of the best football that he's played. He's only 26 years old. He's going to be 27. He's not even going to get out of his contract of the 5-year deal with the Chargers until he's 31. I mean, we signed Stephon Gilmore to pretty much the exact same money guaranteed when he signed, and he was a year older than JC Jackson when we signed him. So it's frustrating. I know that it wasn't a luxury last year like we had this year, where we just had buttloads of cap space, and we probably could have made this deal get done, but they don't get it done. And I was a little shocked. I remember texting you and I'm like 16 and a half a year. And when you look at that, it's more than fair. And I think that I would have probably paid 18 for JC. When you get towards 19 and 20, that's where I probably would have been like, yeah, well, go let him get the bag then, if that's really what he's getting. But he gets 16.5 million a year with a couple, tweaks here and there on how it's paid and how the cap hit is for the Chargers. But that's going to be a good defense. They trade for Khalil Mack. They still have the 17th overall pick, depending on what they do with that, whether they go Jordan Davis or something. They have a lot of options. And it sucks because now you're looking at it, and unless New England goes and, like you mentioned, finds a bargain of a corner, Javarius Ward, someone else in free agency, or they hit in the draft, our secondary that was already thin last year is looking very, very thin right now.
Yeah, and I think the biggest aspect, kind of like you mentioned, of that JC Jackson contract is all that money up front. I think he's been playing for a solid amount of years for very cheap. I think he's only made millions of dollars, but only made like under $5 million total career earnings, something crazy like that for the 4 or 5 years he's been in the NFL. He deserves a bag. He wanted a bag, and he got it. And he's getting $40 million guaranteed in his first 2 seasons up front. That's a lot of money. That's life-changing money. And he deserves it, and he's going to get it. And I think that's the biggest factor between the Chargers and the Patriots. If the Patriots offered him $16 million per year, $17 million per year even, they backload their contracts. That's what they like to do. The Patriots this year don't have a lot of cap space. They have $10 million in cap space right now. Next season, $111 million in cap space. So the Patriots would move that money, have a cheap deal this year to have a low cap hit this season, move the money into next year, the year after, spread that cap hit out, and have it get progressively higher and higher as the seasons go on that deal. So that's how the Patriots like to structure contracts. I don't think, Bill, we can't afford structuring a contract like the Chargers just did. And I think that's what made the biggest difference between JC going to the Chargers and any other team. Any other offers probably didn't have the money up front like the Chargers did. Chargers had a ton of money to spend. They gave it to him up front. Herbert's still on his rookie contract. So after these 2 seasons, when JC gets paid his $40 million guarantee, JC's cap hit goes down, and then Herbert's going to sign a deal and get paid money. So it's going to balance out. So I think the Chargers played this pretty well, got a great player. Their defense looks nasty now. Their defensive line improved a ton, especially if they draft Jordan Davis. Their secondary, Derwin James, JC Jackson, Asante Samuel Jr. They got some players on that defense, and that AFC West continues to look scarier and scarier. So it's tough to lose a guy like this. He got a lot of money. He didn't get as much money as I thought. If we saw today, oh, JC signed with the Chargers $22 million annually, I would have been like, okay, I can't be mad at that. Like, what? I don't expect the Patriots to pay him that. What hurt was seeing him sign for $16.5 million. It seemed pretty reasonable, and the Patriots just didn't get the deal done. And like I said, I think that guaranteed money up front was what he was looking for. He got a bag. He's going to get $28 million this next season, like you said. It's great for him. I'm happy for him, but I'm also frustrated that we just lost that our top corner, our number one corner, and now our secondary looks very thin.
Yeah, I think the other part that's frustrating is you look around the league, you look at the Christian Kirk contract, and I could see this if New England didn't want to go sign J.C. Jackson for the money they wanted to flip it and go get an Allen Robinson, a true receiver one or something. But I don't see any other people on the market right now that are worth $16.5 million for this roster. Allen Robinson is going to demand so much money now after Christian Kirk signs his 4-year, $72 million contract. It's at like $22 million a year on the cap for Christian Kirk, and he is nowhere near the receiver that Allen Robinson is. And then now you're just talking, okay, well, let's go get Marquez Valdez Scantling, or let's go get DJ Chark. Those guys are probably going to want 15 million too. And then now you're just looking, are we going to look in a year from now and say this is an Aguilar contract where it looked good at the time and we were excited off of what they were coming off of, but they just didn't perform in the system. So the price of the receiver market, which is where I think New England has their hand in the most too, is so high right now. And you're telling me that if New England were to go sign DJ Chark for 15 million, 100 times out of 100, I would have rather have taken JC's contract with 28 million in year one over DJ Chark for however many years and 15 million. It's just the Patriots have always had a true lockdown corner, and that's what JC Jackson provides. The amount of depth we have in the secondary and lack of cornerback ones is concerning enough. I want a receiver one. You want a receiver one. I think a lot of Patriots fans want a receiver one. But if it means overpaying for a guy like Jacksonville did for DJ Chark, let us go in next year with Jacoby Myers, Kendrick Bourne, Nelson Aguilar, and hope that Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry can break out and, bank on that. And maybe we hit on a receiver in the draft. It's not worth overpaying for a guy. And I think that this is a contract you look at with JC Jackson that it ain't overpaying at all. This is, I firmly believe this. I've said this multiple times. I sound like a broken record. He hasn't even played his best football yet. He started for 1 year. He's been playing behind Stephon Gilmore, which is great. And he's going to take all that knowledge. And then now he's going to be gaining experience against all the number one receivers in the league that they want him to lock down. I think he's just going to get better and better. And you're going to look back on this contract in 2 or 3 years and be like, dang, you got a guy on your roster for 14 million this year because you paid him up front. And now he's one of the best corners at 29, 30 years old.
Yeah, that's the part that stinks is they're going to have JC for incredible value later in that deal. Early on, they're paying the price up front, a lot of money, but it's going to pay off for them in the long run, it seems. Like you mentioned, the wide receiver market is going crazy right now. As much as we need a receiver, we need a cornerback twice as much at least. I mean, we are desperate for a cornerback right now. We already were looking for a cornerback in the draft or free agency before JC wasn't re-signed. Now losing JC, I mean, that skyrockets up the list. That's the number one priority for the Patriots for sure. That needs to be, is replacing that position. And I think they can do it in a couple quick ways. Like we mentioned, signing a guy like Ward, drafting an Andrew Booth Jr., Kyer Elam in the first round, something like that. That's a good start for sure. That's a really good start. It's one of the things with these receivers is like we just saw with Amari Cooper, Jarvis Landry, teams like when teams overpay for receivers, or they have a receiver on a big contract that's they don't think is worth it anymore, they either have to cut him or try to trade him for really low value. And you never know. Jacksonville, I mean, paying that much money for a receiver, eventually, if teams keep overpaying for receivers, they're going to run out of money, and somebody's going to end up getting cut. And that's usually where the Patriots thrive: is somebody gets cut, they swoop in there, low value or high potential for a low cost. That's usually when they sweep in there, especially during the Brady era, stuff like that. So it's a little bit different. Now you got to pay guys more to come here, because you can't say, hey, we're going to win a Super Bowl. We got Tom Brady. If you come in here, it's a free ride, and you can take a little less money to be part of a championship team. So we can't really do that anymore. Judon was out there recruiting hard. I loved that today. That was pretty funny, but it's a tough situation. We need a corner badly. We need a linebacker. We need a receiver. And I don't really know if we get a top tier of any of those. My most likely out of all those is corner, because of the need and because of the price range of those corners that came off the market today. Carlton Davis signed for $15 million a year. I think you can get Ward for that 12, in that 12 range probably. There's still some talent left on the board at receiver as well, but that receiver market is crazy. I don't think you see Bill Belichick paying any receiver that much money. It's still crazy to me that he gave Nelson Aguilar the money that he gave him this past season, but it's not in the cards. I don't think. I'd love to see it. I would love to get Allen Robinson. I just don't think it's worth it. And for a guy like Valdez-Scantling or something like that, he's still going to command a lot of money based off this Kirk contract. That contract just shoots everybody's value and asking price up. Will they get it? I don't know, but they're definitely going to be asking for it after this contract.
Yeah, and the other thing that's frustrating about this is, people are like, oh, the Patriots didn't have the money that the Chargers had. Yeah, they didn't, but the cap is crap. I mean, you've said it, and look at the Saints, look at the Packers. They wiggle their nose and they have boatloads of cap space. There are 5 or 6 obvious ways, in our opinion. Now, we're not Bill Belichick, but we have a video on it. You should go check that out if you haven't. That there are 5 or 6 obvious ways to improve this team, not only by getting rid of certain players, possibly getting picks back for them, but saving cap space and using it towards a JC Jackson or another guy. So it's frustrating when you have, those ways that are just right there, and then you don't see the Patriots do it. And you wonder, and I know a lot of people are starting to question Bill. I don't know if, we still can do that. It definitely is frustrating, but we'll see how the team performs. And it's looking thin right now, but there's still a lot that can happen. Make sure you guys comment down below what you thought of the JC Jackson contract, if you're happy he left or not. Like and subscribe. Stay up to date. We're going to have lots of off-season videos, especially in the next coming days, of free agency recaps, our live streams coming up, where we'll talk more in depth about this and let you guys chat with us. But until then, make sure you guys like and subscribe. Follow us on Instagram. Stay up to date, all things Patriots, and we'll talk to you later.